piece here is one of my brooches. It's one of quite a few series that I've done, exploring how I can capture sort of organic layering of paper within a precious metal structure. So I'm using tension to hold all these papers so that they can be you know, taken out, moved, interchanged, that sort of idea. It doesn't actually, but I'd been thinking about what to call my pieces, because they're all based on my sort of longing for home and sort of sense of place and finding that home here. And I'm from Orkney, and we have a lot of our own sort of words and dialect and our own last names and surnames. So I've been thinking about using those because they're just words at the end of the day, but they mean more to me. And it's the same sort of idea with the sort of hidden features within all the pieces that, you know, I kind of wanted to focus on. Well, I suppose I have always been interested in my sketchbooks and my process. I find it really interesting how we're all so different. And so that was kind of something I wanted to really focus on throughout my whole fourth year. And so within that, I really started to realise that I liked using drawing materials and the sort of splashes and organic sort of flowing shapes and things that came from those.
And ink in particular?
Yes, yeah, ink, and it was all the sort of the drawing materials, you know, using the papers and the thicknesses of papers and that sort of thing that I really wanted to pick up on. And so that was something where I kind of started off with, was the sort of the drawing idea anyway, and to bring that into my work as well, and to, you know, bring that into a physical piece, into a 3D piece. As I say, I think it was probably more the sort of process. I feel, I suppose when I'm away from home, I kind of lose that safety net, I suppose. And I think with a sort of focused process, a sort of steady pace, that sort of thing, I think that was comforting to me. And so within doing these drawings over and over and over and over again, and layering them up, I found a comfort in that. So I think that's where the pieces sort of started to form from, you know, the 3D shapes. Well, it sort of stemmed from the drawing aspect, firstly, but I think I really enjoy pieces that you struggle to work out what the material is at first glance. You know, I really like exploring the material itself and the piece, and, you know, a sort of hidden aspect to it maybe. And so the idea of using everyday materials that I use every day in the studio, that we all use, using that and making it beautiful and making it a sort of surprise to the viewer and the wearer, I think that was something that I really wanted to focus on. And it's also the sort of the craft and the time spent on the piece is really quite important to me. And so that's something that I wanted to incorporate into my pieces. You know, the inks, they take hours and hours and hours and hours to form and dry, and that was something I wanted to be able to show, you know, the depth of that within the pieces. Yes, well, this one's actually the front, but I do have ones in a series that is, but they all have different fronts and backs and sides. So yeah, it's I wanted to, you know, use the sort of circular form to really focus in and frame parts of the papers that I really liked and wanted to highlight. So I think actually being able to spend the amount of time that I want to on the one sort of single idea, flowing right through. I mean, you explore so many different aspects, but I think being able to just be able to do that, you know, and have the time, and yeah, I think that's been the most valuable to me anyway. I've really enjoyed it, and definitely. I think right at the start of the year I thought I was quite a sort of easygoing, flowing sort of, oh, it'll be fine, but I really think I'm quite a formulaic person, and I quite I think I've realised that I enjoy efficiency and sort of structure and that sort of thing, so I think that's maybe something I would want to explore more in the future, as a sort of a structure maybe, you know, with that sort of idea of processing my ideas right from the start, and forming those ideas into objects.
Well, right, this is a bangle, if it's, you can tell. Big statement, don't think it'd be that wearable, but you know. It's made with titanium and silver, and oxidized silver. So I just wanted a little colour tone there. Yeah, and it's just twisted wires. It comes from the weaving looms, particularly the ones, I took loads of pictures of the ones downstairs, and these shapes come from within that. It's all just very visual. Just heat treated titanium, so it took me a while to work out like how long it would take you to get certain colours, and it ranges. It starts off a sort of purple colour, and then it'll go dark blue, and then light blue, and kind of yellow colour. So it's just trying to work out and make sure you're not heating it too much, etc. But I quite liked having different tones coming through it. I didn't want it completely flat. So this is. I mean, I originally started off more in the textile, like textile was my starting point. It was more about the fabrics and the sort of up close details, etc. And I started to move away from that into more of the utensils, if that makes sense, like needles, embroidery loops, etc. And that is what led me onto the actual machines themselves. So I kind of wanted to combine the two ideas of textiles and the machines coming together a bit, which is where the colour comes in with quite like geometric. I knew that because I started off with steel, and I knew that when I started with the steel you could squeeze it and such, and it was really fun. Not fun, but you know, you kind of did want to play with them, and I wanted to keep that an element throughout. And some of them are more solid, you wouldn't really want to play with them as I am with this, but yeah, there's a few of them that you can do that with, which is what I wanted.
And so is this the sort of first major piece you made for the collection?
No, I had a series of 3 brooches, which are mainly titanium and gold. Got a little bit of gold in there. Yeah, but they've got the same sort of squeeziness to them. Yeah, no, I don't think it's going to be too obvious. I'm much more in the idea of my jewellery. It's not necessarily conceptual as such, it's more just, I just like them to look nice, and I want people to appreciate that, and if they want to know more about it, then that's totally, yeah. I suppose like if people knew what looms would look like inside, they would maybe know that. But I think they look kind of mechanical, not mechanical, but...
I actually think it's down, I don't know if what you think, but it's down to the angle, so when you hold it flat like that, the twisted wire looks fabric-like. Is that intentional? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, that's what the twisted wires do come quite literally from the machines themselves, but I did, when I started doing them, I was like, no, there's definitely a more organic, you know what I mean, like a kind of fabric-y look, I suppose, as you said. The twisted wire as well, to me, is I kind of associate with textiles. I always think, that's why I wanted to incorporate colour, because I always associate colour with fabrics and sort of natural things like that.
And what sort of colour fabrics were you looking at initially? Did that inspire the colours, or was...
No, not at all. The colours I was looking at before were like bright pink. I don't know if you remember. Like,
I do, yeah.
Properly, like stark colours, and I was using threads and such, but I think I was really flat with all that. And I wasn't enjoying it so much. And then when I decided that I was liking the steel, titanium was brought forth, and actually the subtle colours you get in that were quite nice, that worked with both. So. It has been quite intimidating actually. I've never really, I feel like this year's been, it has been the most stressful, but it's also been the most, I felt most enthusiastic about everything that I'm doing. And I felt like this is really, I've really like nailed something that works for me and I've enjoyed. And doing the whole collection's really satisfying. I'm really excited for it all to be finished, not because I want it to be over, but because I'm really excited to see it all as one.
And so when you look back on them, when you look at your original sketchbooks, can you see the links that have taken you through the year?
No, not at all, because I know some people are really, there's a couple of people who've had such a like consistent way of working throughout, kind of like first to now, whereas I've been so different with each project. There's only been a couple of projects that I've really thought I like that, but it's just taken me so long to be like, this is what I want to do, and it got me there. I don't know whether it's because you got to choose exactly what you wanted to do, or whether I just put more of my heart and soul into this. I don't know.
It's a brooch and it's got a lens at the top. The whole point of my work is kind of to create intrigue and interest in people. I want people to look at my work and kind of question, what is it, what material is it, you know, and the colours that I've chosen are so extremely opposite to each other. There's the black and then there's bursts of colours. My initial inspiration was actually kind of the idea of escapism and you know, get visual escapism. So when we look at objects, we kind of go into the object. We kind of think, what does it remind me of? What does it make me feel? So my initial idea was that, and then through the process, it's just kind of, you know, it's led me to experiment with the materials that I've got, and there's not been as much thought in the sense of trying to do what I did originally, but it's actually taken its own journey in a way, and the work's kind of speaking for itself and hopefully has the reaction that I want, with people kind of questioning what material it is. And but I chose this piece because I think it captures what I want to do, because it's got, you know, I mean, it's got the lens in it, so people like automatically want to look into it, and then they obviously it's kind of an optical illusion, which is once again kind of the idea that I was originally looking at. It's a secret.
Okay. And it's meant to stay a secret.
It's not meant to stay a secret. People do figure it out straight away, but there is that initial kind of like, what is that? Because it you know, it looks a certain way. I don't know whether I should say it or not now.
No, it's up to you. No, you don't have to.
It's quite obvious what it is, but I'll just say, I mean, because people will probably want to know. I've basically used balsa wood and paint in different ways, so applied paint in different ways, and I mean, this one is varied. So basically the main ingredients in the work is balsa wood and paint, and the main reason for using balsa wood just is for the lightweight, you know, and I wanted to create things that were big. This isn't that big, but you know, being able to have big pieces but actually not that heavy. So it worked. Once again, like I said, it's about the materials that I've explored with. It was actually in National History Museum in London, and it was the raw minerals. It's just a whole exhibition with and it just looks like outer space kind of stuff. Yeah. And you know, I was looking at psychedelic imagery and that kind of stuff, and that's what kind of triggered me with the colours and that kind of you know, the shapes that look almost like impossible to be natural but actually are natural, and that's kind of what I've been trying to do. And in a way, the shapes that I've got in my pieces are natural in a way, because like when I'm making them, I don't decide prior to making it where the facets are going to be and where, you know, what scale it's going to be. It's kind of me working with the material and just seeing how it goes, which has been a really nice way to work actually. I want that intrigue more, because you know, when somebody looks at it, they'll kind of look at it, and whenever I look at an object, I look at it from all angles, and this one initially you kind of look over the top, but then because it's a darker blue on the inside and it's kind of glistens, you know, you kind of catch the light on it, and then it will kind of make people want to look at it from a different angle, and it's just basically the idea of it being two different objects almost that's in one piece.
Okay. I mean, has colour always been quite an important thing in your work?
Yeah, I think colour's always been something that's triggered something, you know, thought, because colour, you know, people have favourite colours, people have colours that make them feel a certain way, and that's just something that I like working in.
Do you feel you have a certain palette when working with these, or has it been quite
open? Not really actually. I've just been sort of using all the colours I can, and it's kind of got to a stage where it's like, there's obviously I kind of get attracted to colours that I like, opposed to some colours that I don't like, or you know, I think it's just what's aesthetically pleasing to me sometimes. I've been talking so much about escapism and what makes me excited. So instead of me thinking about what a colour relates to, if a colour kind of feels right, it's what I kind of go with. If it looks right, and I'll try it out and I'll kind of, you know, put it with a piece. If it fits that piece, it sounds ridiculous, if it fits that piece then I'd use it, otherwise I'll kind of leave it and then come back to it and try different colours. So it's quite a free process. I think at the start it was a bit rocky, but I think that retrospectively has been probably the best thing for me, because, you know, now I'm at a stage where I'm working on things that I enjoy and I love, but that rocky stage I've gone back to and I've looked at it, and actually there's some really good elements of that I didn't see at the time because I wasn't 100% sure. So to be able to go back to that and really pick out the best elements of that period has actually been so helpful. So it's been a fun journey. It's been difficult, but in a good way.
Doing a lot of 2D drawing, but because what I'm looking at is quite 3D, all the botanicals and the way they climb up railings and things, I started drawing in wire, and I really liked the kind of shapes I got just from drawing with binding wire. So I started repeating that, and then I basically kind of got to this kind of piece, these kind of shapes and the way they're kind of put together. I did a few projects in previous years based around botanics, and the Botanic Gardens in Glasgow being a real good source of inspiration for that. So I was inspired by the colours and also how to kind of make stuff that's so natural look unnatural and look as unlike what you've taken it from as possible. I also really like the colours up there, but I didn't want to use them in a really kind of traditional way. So I've been intensifying and isolating the colours to just give it a bit more contrast and make it a bit more interesting. Yeah, basically it's not as rigid as kind of silver or copper wire, so I found that it took my shapes more and it looked more like my sketches, just because it kind of keeps a kind of sketchy shape rather than being too rigid. And what I was looking at wasn't too rigid, so I thought it just fitted the kind of shapes and my drawing style better. Usually I start by taking photographs and then I'll Photoshop them and make the colours more intense, and make the saturation and things better and different hues. And then I'll do drawings from that and draw on top of them and into them, and then I get my colours from the end drawings. It's really light, which I like because you can basically take it really big. So this piece can be worn at different lengths. So it can be like a really long neck piece or a shorter one. And because it's so light, you're not restricted at all when you're wearing it, even though it is quite a big thing to wear, which is really important to me because I wanted my things to be big and bright and quite playful. I've made a lot of my own textile prints and I've put them into different brooches and neck pieces. I like that because it means that a bit of my drawing is actually in the piece, which is nice. I'd like people to wear them maybe layered up or quite a few together. So you've got your contrasting colours and textures all together. I think that'd be nice. New materials this year. My work before, I did kind of a lot of enamel stuff last year with bright colours, and I loved the colours, but I didn't like the weightiness and I didn't like the restrictions. So this has allowed me to get the colour in with no restrictions. I really enjoyed being able to kind of make a piece at the start of the year and then develop it rather than handing in a piece that you thought, oh, I could have actually done this once you're looking at it as a finished piece. It's been nice to go back to things and change them throughout the year because I've done that with quite a lot of my pieces.
And can you look at this piece now and then look at the first piece you made this year? Can you still see a relationship between them?
Yeah, a lot of the colours is kind of similar, and they're all big pieces, or quite statement anyway, so I think there's still a relationship between all of them.
This piece here was made by carving and dripping wax onto sponges, which were then drilled into to make the form, which would then cast in the silver. After cleaning it up, I wanted to create the surface so it was quite uneven and it still had a lot of its texture to it. So I covered it in the layers of enamel, firing it each time to build up the colour and depth, using just 2 different types of enamel, which I ground in different ways to get the different colours.
And what's the difference in enamel? Are they different types of enamel? Or?
No, they're completely the same enamels, they're just 2 different types of colour, but I took them in different batches and ground them down into finer grades, so some of the finer grades actually have a lighter colour than the darker and thinner and more dense grades. I've always been interested in colour, especially transparent colours and how that works with different materials and different colours behind it. I picked blue because a lot of my source material was looking at the sky and looking at the sea and the movement and the forms that they create, so it just kind of naturally blended itself into using blue, and I think that the transparent colours with the blue really show well when it's on something either black or white. It completely changes the colour, so it interested me for this project. I was just going around last summer and taking pictures of everything I found interesting, so I was away kind of travelling, doing your intra-railing thing, and it just seemed to be when I came back to edit my photos that everything seemed to be to do with sky or sea, so it just must have been subconsciously what I was interested in at the time, so it felt that I went with it. Westland twice, and I studied traditional techniques and more contemporary experimental techniques, and I wanted to combine the 2 of them together to make my own sort of way of enamelling, and I quite like having texture, and usually enamel it's on a kind of flat surface, you might get texture of building through from colours, but I quite like the idea of actually working on a textured piece as well to give it a new kind of life, and not just your kind of smooth enamel, to actually have that on a different surface. Yeah, it's quite fun to do, quite interesting to learn, because it's almost like a applique jour that you're filling in the holes with enamel, but you're doing that in a curved surface as well, so it's slightly more difficult. You need to build it up in plenty of layers, loads of firings, and kind of be patient with it. It actually kind of blended into using plastics to layering up the transparency. So I was using plastics to begin with, and then it went into kind of resins as well, so that I could use what I was actually using, the sponge, I could still use that in my work at the end as well, because I could cast that in the resin, and having these textures build up and having the air pockets that kind of deflected the light even more throughout the pieces. Light is quite an important part of all my pieces, in some way that some of them need to be lit, and different lights react with the different colours, so when you're wearing it throughout the day it will change the piece as well, and I think that's quite interesting for the wearer to have. Usually in past years it'd maybe be like a month or a few weeks that you work on a piece, and I feel like I'm just kind of starting to get into the project, whereas now I've kind of laid my study myself, I'm doing exactly what I like and stuff that really interests me, and I feel like that's kind of spurred me on to do things that I really enjoy making and I would wear, and that's kind of what I like to make, something that I would wear as well. So having it going on a year, I can actually see this being made, or like progressing from this for the next few years, or maybe even just 6 months down the line, but I do feel like I could continue with this project, and I quite like that.
Okay, so this is a napkin holder. The concept is about like kitchenware and a table and expectations of our contemporary dining experience. So this, I've imagined like a scene, and if the bottle could exceed our expectation when we were having maybe a romantic meal or something, this is what it would do for us. So I imagined someone on both sides of the bottle, and the wine is, well, I would imagine one bottle of wine would be for 2 people, but there is an interchangeable one and you can change it to 4, but that also sits on a water bottle, so that's more for a large scale meal. But the piece is like detachable, so this is the top piece, and you can sit it down like this, and then the lid. The lids are universal to fit large bottles. So this one unscrews. It has a little rubber thing inside from like the top of a drink pourer. I don't know what they're called. So it can fit on any bottle. So you can just like tighten it on, and then you just sit it on. They do spin a little bit, but I think like for a meal for two, you wouldn't really need to spin it unless you wanted to just have some fun and spin it. I've always worked in a restaurant and stuff, so I think like in my final year that's where it's come from, because before I done jewellery all from first to third year, and then I made a jug in third year and really liked it, and then from there just like loved looking at the kitchen and stuff like that. So it's like a spun lid with top forged arms, and the rest is like hand fabricated silver. Yeah, I think I really enjoyed jewellery and found it really interesting, but I don't know, for me I think it was always like a bit bitty. Like maybe like I couldn't get my head around like making jewellery was like, I felt all the things I made was quite flat all the time, but then just when I moved into larger scale I just like imagined everything 3D. But I think that's maybe because I've been lending myself more to like 3D objects and looking at objects, so when you get inspiration from like a bottle, you can imagine a bigger picture and human interaction. So I've done like maybe so far like 7. None are completely finished, but they're all done enough. So every piece is about like connecting 2 scenarios together. So it's kind of, it also came from my frustration of like the disconnection at the table, because you sit and you have a meal, everything has a place, but it's just so far apart. But why? Like, why is it so far apart? So I have another thing, for example, I've got some glass jugs which have some candle holders that actually sit or rely on the glass jug to function. So kind of connecting a kind of, I don't know, ambience and centerpiece, because jugs are always in the middle, so are the candles. One of them I use the height of the jug to elevate the candles to illuminate the table, because, I don't know, candle holders are always tall. I would like to be like have a kitchenware line. Is that, I don't know if that's like silly ambition or like a design for like a company, like not like a Leslie, because maybe that's a bit more, but something like that will have like I just want to make like fun things for the kitchen. I want to have, but I love working in silver and like understanding that, but there's an accessibility that not everyone can have, and my work is very about relationships and everyone, because it's like, well, in the UK, not like Asia, everyone has like similar eating experience, well, the majority anyway, especially when you go out to a restaurant. Like I could imagine like this in some fancy, well not fancy restaurant, but just in a kind of jazzy or like different restaurant, and you just have like a different kind of food with a different experience. The best and worst experience I've had, maybe because like at the start it's so daunting and getting into making, like I dilly-dallied a lot to make my first piece, and then when I made it, like I just like loved making it and being like, oh, what can I make next? So I think like my like work has developed a lot from making that first piece. It just, the very start was like that. I've been thinking and developing my ideas so much, but looking at the first thing I made to now what I'm thinking, like there's so many ways in like construction and how I thought something could be made that I would now go back and do so much easier, but like that's just life. But it's been really fun.
brooch that I've made from a found piece of wood, and I painted it obviously, and put inside a silver ring, and on the inside there's an etched, photo etched image of a boat, and then it's oxidised and rubbed back. Well, my interest was mainly in my childhood and the kind of, when you're an adult you have this, or I do anyway, this magnificent view on your childhood and this just kind of brilliant era and happiness and everything like that. I don't know, I wanted to capture that kind of innocence naivety, and and just like particularly, just obviously it's my own memories, but I would like it to relate to everyone else. So like obviously using quite simple forms and bold colours, and I don't know, I just want to capture a playfulness and like a naive way of building things as well. Yeah, well, mainly photography. I had used in the summer, last summer, just before we came back, I had used my mum and dad's old film camera, and there was still film left in it, and it hadn't been used in like 15 years, and the film was preserved. Anyway, that sparked off this sort of like this amazing nostalgic kind of thing. So I thought I would go around taking photographs of the things that I felt nostalgic about and these kind of happy memories from my childhood. So yeah, basically the photos that I took with that camera at home at this time are like the foundation of the whole project. That's where the colours and the forms come from, and mainly like I use the images directly as well in the work. Right next to the sea, in a very small community, on an island.
Okay.
So yeah.
In Scotland.
In Scotland, yeah, in the west coast of Scotland.
Great. And what were the things you took photographs of?
Mainly, it was things that either visually, so like in their colour, reminded me of just these kind of, like as a child we used to build dens and, you know, like a bit naughty, but like steel dinghies and, you know, just be a bit mischievous when we were kids. It was just things that either smelled very strongly to me of, like, you know, a time of like hiding somewhere, or a building that we had a lot of good times in, or plants that reminded me of things. Some boats that obviously are still in the same place as they were 20 years ago. Like, nothing changes. Which that's what I found out as well when I was going around taking photographs of these things. Like, nothing had changed. It was still the exact same colours, and it was just me and my mind that had changed. But it was kind of a lovely thing to focus on. It's just kind of zooming right back into my childhood. It was so easy to do. It was like a real important factor for me for it to remain fun and exciting and vibrant, and I think when you're a kid everyone's just brilliant, it's just colourful and mad, and well, for me if you're a happy kid or whatever, so it was important to me to have bright fun work, really playful, and just really capture the childhood essence of it all. Amazing, I love it. It kind of is giving me an opportunity to like really discover what it is I like to do. Like, obviously before it was like really short 3-week projects and you just have to blast out an idea, which was good as well, but this year's really focused on what I'm actually interested in, and like that passion for making all the time is just like really good.
This is a brooch inspired by the woodland. It uses various surface techniques to create texture, hammering and then colouring in different ways to create a sense of depth and perspective. I've also explored other surface techniques such as roll printing and Japanese alloy techniques such as shibuichi and mokume gane. And if you ask me about the pink, I will say, you made me do it.
Does Anna not get partial blame as well, no?
Yeah.
No, I really like the pink. I think it makes it sing.
Do you know what? I love the pink now.
Good.
I think it's
Makes that colour sing.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah, that was tricky to do actually. That was a lot of figuring out. I shouldn't use the word alchemy, but creating your own metal is fun. And I combined copper and silver and realised that copper is extremely difficult to melt and they don't really go together, but they went together and it's quite a nice finish.
And so that's an alloy of silver, copper. What's the percentages roughly?
It's the majority is copper. I experimented with the percentages quite a lot. So in the end I went between 1/3 and 1/4 of copper.
And that's where that fantastic
Silver.
sort of pink copper colour comes from in the metal?
No.
No, that's copper, is it?
That's copper, yeah.
And so is there any pieces of shibuichi in there? Or? No, okay. So those are another pieces of work.
Yeah, I've explored patination a lot as well. Creating lovely blues and greens, which I think are evocative of being sort of deep in the forest. I colour that is silver that I have coloured with different types of flux and also silver dust, and luckily it is very like lichen on bark. It's just been a very lucky little glimpse, if you like, of what I've been looking at. Based on the concept of the island, from hill through forest to shore, it's that little world all in one place, and in particular the Hebridean coastal woodlands, which are quite unique, especially in colour, I think. It is where I come from, growing up playing on the shore. I play with composition a lot. I definitely design through making, playing with materials, playing with textures, surfaces, and yeah, it's definitely about evoking a sense of place, because I know what I've sort of put into this and what's behind it, but you might see something else that's familiar to you that's slightly removed. So whatever story I put into it will become somebody else's who doesn't necessarily connect with mine. It's there as a contrast, but if you look, a forest, for example, or there's never simply one colour. There's such a spectrum of colours. Within lichens, within bark, everything. Things are always growing and evolving, and there are always little sparks of colour there. So that colour does exist in nature, it's just minute. So I think I just decided to bring it out. And
make it a real
play
feature.
with it. Yeah, a little hint of what lies behind what we can actually see. It was very challenging at the beginning. I'm enjoying it now because I've come to the realisation that it's not the end of a project, it's actually the beginning of a much larger one. So I feel that I'm at this stage of the year, I actually feel not at the end at all. I think I'm learning a lot now and discovering things because I've done so much work up to this point.
Kind of vase or vessel made from scored and folded copper tube which has been oxidised, and then the sphere is a nylon which has been CNC milled in 2 halves, and then to hold them together there's this silver band which has been kind of rubbed over to hold them in place to stop them from moving. This is George.
This is George. Okay, great. And there's a reason why it's called George?
Yeah, I just kind of decided that I wanted to name all my work after kind of people that have been influential or things, and then George was the first one because George is our inspirational, motivational tortoise.
Right, okay.
So he kind of was the first one, and I was kind of thinking what I do, and yeah, so that came from that, just as a...
Could you explain what the inspirational tortoise is? Because otherwise it's going to be confusing.
George is a wooden tortoise which has been covered in glitter by the girls, and he gives us motivational phrases and quotes to get us through the remaining time of our 4th year. Okay, so to start off I use a program called Quartz Composer. Most of my influence comes from music and sound. I'm really interested in music, and I was looking at ways that I could create the sound to play with form. So the program uses very basic, well, it uses geometric forms, simple geometric forms, and I give them certain parameters, and the sound then reacts with those and find points that are kind of interesting when they interact and cross over. It's an animation that I'll then go back through almost frame by frame, find these interesting points, and kind of take that as a start point to design from. Quite often without an idea of what the piece is actually going to be at the end, what its function will be, but just having an idea of how I like that aesthetically. So this year was simply it's actually a cylinder and a cube that played together. And then yeah, found these interesting points that kind of looked almost impossible to actually work in physical form, but in the digital realm could do whatever it wanted. So yeah, taking those 2 points and then playing around, use a lot of model making to work out how it will actually physically work. So yeah, using like polystyrene balls and card, and playing around with how it weights and will it sit properly, and then either kind of scaling that up, or so then I took this onto the computer, kind of scaled it up and made sure all the proportions were right for like my aesthetic and what I was looking for, and then yeah, just began kind of making process from there. Went through various times of making the tube itself and just trying to work out the best way to do that and getting the best weight in it so that it would sit right, because obviously card and metal are completely different weights, so it might work in card and won't directly translate into the materials that I'm using, but there's a kind of a leeway that I can work out. So this one's actually stayed very much exactly similar to the original model that I made in card and polystyrene. I think the important thing for me is that it's a very strong aesthetic to look at. That's like pleasing to the eye. Although you've got very kind of harsh connections, there's still something very pleasing about it. So the sound isn't always important. I like people to understand maybe the process that it's gone through, but it doesn't have to be a reason that they kind of understand it. They can look at it and understand it on an aesthetic level rather than a conceptual and the whole process. I think because my process is so digital, I kind of wanted to bring that into the work itself in some way. The issues that I had with going from digital to the digital fitting with the hand, obviously you've got something that's very precise and made exactly as you build it, and then you've got something that will warp and change, and you know, any finger dents you have to kind of get rid of. So with this one it was very kind of a bit of a challenge going. It's like putting a square peg in a round hole. and yeah, but that I think this being the first one kind of that I did with it, there was going to always be those hurdles, but I think I've now found the way that it works, and I think they very nicely sit together. I think using like certain colours that I'm using as well, you're not getting that harsh industrial kind of look from it. It's got you could think that it's handmade, and there's this nice kind of balance between them. So yeah, I think it works well with the work that I'm doing, because the forms that I'm using are so bold and geometric and strong, even if they're handmade. So there's that kind of crossover between the perfectly made digital techniques and then these hand forms. They have to be perfect, and that's the kind of thing that I like to do. Very monotonous work, but yeah.
You're handcrafting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I started off just using like the way I wanted to bring the music in was through these visualizers, and at first I was using just ones that I could source online, and they felt like a really big stumbling block that I couldn't do what I wanted to. Like it had its parameters, and I had to kind of do what it did. So then like the whole breakthrough of finding this program that I could build my own visualizers, that helped the work develop a lot. It went from being these kind of really quite organic forms that I was first kind of working with at the start of the year to now these bold geometric shapes, which I much prefer. So yeah, it's developed in the way that what I'm using to design has influenced my work, but I think that's been a positive rather than a compromise. It's been something that it happened and I was very happy with it and chose that to continue strongly through my work.
What about the freedom that a full year gives you? How have you dealt with that?
Yeah, it's been a lot of kind of space to think, which I've enjoyed. Not having just maybe 4 weeks or something I was finding before at the end of the 4 weeks I'd have this brand new idea that I wanted to continue, and you didn't have the time to do that. So working on a piece maybe for 4 or 5 weeks, and then halfway through you've got all of a sudden you hit this thing that sparks the next one, and it's been nice to
Basically, this is a bangle and it's got wires around it, and you can move it. So when you've got it on, the wires have that kind of movement. Basically, I started looking at organic forms like plants and flowers, and then looking into more microscopic pictures.
Yeah.
And plant cells. So there's more repetitive patterns. Plants and flowers, they are alive, so there's like that kind of movement, and I'm always interested to bring that element into my work, so that when the wearers wearing it, they can kind of play with it, and it's more interesting. As I was saying, that at the start it was all organic forms, and then moving on to looking at microscopic images. The stuff I'm making just now is a combination of geometric and organic forms, and multiple casting, repetitive shapes and elements. I've always been interested in fashion, and I've studied fashion and textile management. So so I've always been interested in fashion, and I want to make my work wearable, but at the same time well made. Yeah, I think fourth year I'm able to do stuff that I'm interested in, and make things that I want to make. this is a bangle that contracts to a handheld object.
Okay.
And it expands.
Wow. And then closes in on the wrist.
And then you can adjust the size to the size of your wrist. Then just take it off. Yes, it's sterling silver. I got all these bits cast, and then I got them gold plated, and it's 24 karat gold. And the theme behind my work is a dandelion. I'm using other seeds as well, but dandelion was where I got my start. And my dad started giving me dandelion seeds instead of flowers for my birthday about 6 years ago. And I really wanted to use them for something. And when I started taking photos and making things, he started giving me more of them. And then other people started giving me dandelion seeds. And so I have boxes and boxes and boxes of seeds in the house. And I really want to use them, and I want to give something back to everyone who's showing me love, like giving me dandelion seeds. I've been trying to make it as light and delicate as possible, and I think this is one of the most successful pieces, because it's quite light for what it is, for the size of it, and when you look at it, it doesn't really look very heavy, so I'm quite happy with that. Yeah, because dandelion reminds me of childhood, and when I watch people like blow dandelion seeds and play with them, I think that almost everybody becomes a child again, no matter of how old they are. You know, even adults become children again, and I find it quite fascinating. And I think if I can kind of evoke the same emotion with my jewelry, it would make me very happy. So it's kind of one of my aims. I really want to do that. I want them to be playing with it rather than wearing it and it being static, you know. I think when I see people play with it, it gives me more satisfaction rather than when somebody's just wearing it. Yeah, I don't think I would have ever made this without CAD, because I had to 3D print all of these small bits in SLS nylon. I don't think, well, maybe I could have made it, but it would have taken me years. And now I could do it like in the matter of weeks. Fantastic. So it was very helpful. Plus it was interesting. It was much quicker to kind of experiment with different designs that I wanted with these parts.
And, you know, can you talk a bit about
it? Has a very nice feel to it when you're touching it. And it's quite flexible as well. I was really surprised with that because I had never tried SLS nylon before I started this piece. And when all my 3D prints came, I was quite surprised. And I thought it was a nice material to use on its own, not necessarily to use for casting. So I think I might experiment with it in the future and see what I can get. I think this was my favorite year. It was the most difficult year, but since I got to do kinetic stuff as well, I don't know, just it makes me really happy. It's really difficult and very challenging, but I think that's where I find the pleasure in kind of conquering that challenge, you know. So, no, I really, really enjoyed this year. And I think that I have, well, at least I have developed my skills of riveting, because last year I couldn't rivet at all. Well, I was really scared of it as well. Every time I had to do it, my hands were shaking. Right. And now it's like, okay, I have to do 32 rivets per piece. And I prefer tube riveting for some reason. Well, for these pieces, I think that the detail of having holes is quite nice. Kind of reminds me of seeds themselves.
Well, all of my degree was made from either 100% recycled precious metals or sort of responsibly sourced other like materials, whether it's like copper that I've got from signs that is just kind of waste from factories and stuff around Glasgow. And yeah, just trying to make everything that wee bit more responsible. So I'd say this piece is one of the things I initially sort of designed to begin with.
Okay.
Which, I mean, my work's inspired by sort of the universe and why we feel the need to explore space, and when we're out in space, why we look back on ourselves, and how we're always doing this kind of selfish reflection on of ourselves. And also like why do we waste so much money and time sort of going out into space when really we could actually be using that money to sort of help like problems on Earth as they are. But at the same time, going out into space is also the kind of information that we collect out there helps sort of make visible to the public issues like climate change. It helps sort of make us change our minds about our sort of mentality towards sort of sustainability and just trying to sort of realise that climate change is happening. It's the precious metal bursary which has really helped sort of, there's no way I'd be able to make something on this scale kind of thing, because all the rivets are 18 karat gold. Wow. So it kind of helps just do those slight things that help make a piece. The kind of main frame is sort of laser cut directly into silver, and then each of these wee individual pieces are sort of plotted out on CAD, and then they were 3D printed and then cast into silver. And then I had to sort of basically sit like with a jigsaw and sort of work out where they all fitted, because it's 112 pieces around it, but 64 of them are completely unique. All of my pieces are sort of having that relationship between the sort of man-made and things that are helped on by with machines. So this one, it was just a small experiment looking at sort of the distortion of a pattern, because I was looking at information, things out in space, and how that is distorted sort of through the tools that we use to look into space. I was also, like with some of these other ones, it is just, I was working really quite intuitively, just thinking about the themes that I have, whether it was a sort of sense of like peacefulness or looking at sort of time or eternity and things, and just sort of seeing what became of sort of the feelings or the sort of essence of the kind of project that I'm doing. Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It kind of allows me to explore a lot of sort of more smooth processes that I found that I had time to actually explore. That there's kind of different types of 3D printing that I explored, sort of 2 different wax printing machines and nylon sintering, and also the laser cutting I did in acrylic and I did in the silver. So it gave me time to actually explore these materials and sort of, or explore the processes and sort of see how that affected sort of my design process, which you can't do in a short space of time. It also helped me explore, I kind of looked into like engraving, sort of just other other techniques and things, and I sort of did narrow down and just find what I thought best suited what I was looking at.
Project's been looking at cars and the connection between cars and jewellery, because they're both like a kind of high monetary value goods, and I see quite a lot of connections between them because they're both kind of metallic and shiny, and I see the little gems like reflectors in the car. So I started looking at that, and then I got interested in the end of a car's life, how it's crushed when it's got rid of, and about how you'd keep jewellery even if it was broken because of its sentimental value. So I was experimenting with crushing the metal and eventually found a way of kind of controlling it so it kind of gives more of a like controlled crushing. Yeah, so that's where that bit came from, and then I wanted to incorporate stones in my work originally, but I thought it was nice to actually use the reflectors. So these are just bits of crushed up reflector that I've set in with resin. And the piece actually
comes apart. Fantastic.
And that won't happen because it will be attached properly. Basically it's tube, so that's just a copper tube which starts about that long, and then I have a former that fits inside, and then a big tube with a hole in the middle that fits over the top. So that's just put in a hydraulic press and pressed down, and the former inside stops the metal from shrinking inside, so it kind of gives it a bit more structure. It's still quite unpredictable, like you never really know what it's going to do, but you have a bit more control. Because at first I was just crushing it just on its own, and it just didn't look nice, but yeah, it's nice to have a bit of control over your work. I think I kind of see it the way that the crushing when it's a car kind of ends the car's life, but for me I'm using it as like a process of creating the work, so it's kind of like a backwards like life cycle almost, so I quite like that it's kind of completely backwards, like how my pieces are made compared to like how a car is. Basically the Sky Arts Award it uses my crushing process, but it was scaled up to this kind of size, which was a bit of a challenge given that our press is made for jewellery, so it's not actually that big. But with the help of Nigel and the staff, we were able to work out a way to actually crush the tube on that scale. So it's basically like a section of this, and then it has a acrylic base which is sorted into the bottom, and then kind of reflecting the reflectors. The text is laser engraved. That's what I've always found. I'd never really enjoy the first week or so of a project because you don't really know what you're doing, and you know, you don't feel as maybe enthusiastic as when you start kind of making connections and you see like whatever, like I think in your day-to-day life you like see things that like will inspire you and stuff, and it takes a while to build that up, I think, to get really into it. So now I've really enjoyed it, yeah. So I've been looking at baking as part of my final year project. It's something that I do to de-stress and relax, so I wanted to incorporate that into my work, so that then it's just something that I really enjoy, so that's what I wanted to do for my 4th year. So I've been looking at the processes of baking that I enjoy, such as mixing and rolling and piping, rather than specific cakes as such. So I've adopted a kind of very process-led manner in my making, initially looking at different materials such as paper and silicone, and looking at how they reacted to an individual process being applied to it. That then led me to wanting to create a more cohesive collection. So I started looking at porcelain and how I could adopt that into my making. So looking at applying those processes to just one material and seeing the different effects that I could get from that. So looking at processes such as rolling and the different creases that you can get in that. I wanted to create more durable forms of my initial research, so I started looking into porcelain because I like the whiteness and the purity of it, and I thought that it would work very well to the different processes being applied to it. And yeah, so I've been looking at different ways in which I can mix it, so I found that mixing it with water has led to me being able to pipe it, just like icing. The pink colour, I wanted the collection to be, I've had a lot of fun making it, and I wanted the collection to almost describe me in a way. So pink is my favourite colour, and I wanted that to be a part of it, and looking at nice kind of subtle details with the glazes and applying the glazes almost like an enamel. So maybe just on the edges and different textures with shocks of pink coming through, and different kind of mixing glazes as well, so that then you can see
different kind of textures and layers of depth coming through.
That's quite subtle.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I really have. I've had a lot of fun doing it. In other years, I've maybe not had as much time to develop my kind of confidence in working with different materials. So I feel like now that I've been given that time, I've got more confident with working with it, and I now know that I can get the effects that I want and just go ahead and do it. So yeah, it's been really fun just having that time to develop your own ideas.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's been good.